Good evening and welcome to Eastport Yacht Club, EYC. Although sometimes I think we think the E stands for environmental. We really do have the commitment to the environmental. It's a thread that goes through everything that we do here, from the building that you are here in to the educational programs we do for our sailing. It's really something that's very special. And so when we have a chance to partner with other people, we can make that impact that much greater. And so tonight is about a celebration of those partnerships and those programs and the people. In a couple days, we're about to celebrate our 40th year. And so you are now a part of that fabric, that story that we tell. And for the next 40 years, we're looking forward to that continuing. So thank you. Thank you all for being here for that. Tonight specifically, however, of all those programs, we're really here to celebrate the oyster recovery effort and the special partners, of course, with that. And working together, we work with Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Our marina out there has a living wave wall thanks to the oysters. And we are so proud, And we are so proud to participate in the Oyster Recovery Partnership and their Marylanders Grow Oysters program. Our oyster gardening effort has 36 cages in the marina this year. Tonight, we are going to hear firsthand from Chris Hopkinson about his epic Chesapeake Bay paddle. 9 days, 203 miles on a stand-up paddleboard to raise money and awareness for the ORP mission. So before we get into the program, there is much to celebrate. So let's take a moment to toast Chris's successful paddle, the tireless efforts of our partners and our volunteers to restore the Chesapeake Bay oyster. To the oysters. Cheers. Cheers. Okay. So another important partnership in our relationship is with our community and the city and the state. And we are fortunate to have with us tonight State Senator Sarah Elfrin. She is the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on the Chesapeake Bay and a member of the Chesapeake Bay Tri-State Commission. She is also a member of the Maryland Oyster Advisory Commission. And so I please welcome you for your comments.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I feel like this is a little bit of normalcy in a world where we're running into tech challenges constantly. So I'm so grateful we got it to work. I'm just here, and I promise not to filibuster. It's something senators are known to do. I'm here to just say thank you. The Commodore mentioned I have the privilege of representing you in the Maryland State Senate. I get to work on the issues that you care about, that this community cares about every single day. When it comes to rainfall, when it comes to stormwater, when it comes to protecting our greatest natural resource, the Chesapeake Bay, and when it comes to protecting and expanding oysters across the bay. So I have the great privilege of standing up for you on the Senate floor when we're able to go back to the Senate floor and fight for the issues that you care about the most. But I'd be remiss if I said I can't do that alone. I can pass state laws, I can pass funding, I can work on a statewide level, but when it comes to actual participation, when it comes to participating in the Marylanders Grow Oysters program and having an oyster cage off your dock and being a citizen scientist and engaging young people and having a passion for the Bay, that comes down to you. And the Commodore mentioned the incredible partnerships that we have here, and just looking around the room at friends, we have folks from Oyster Recovery Partnership, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Severn River Association. All of this is possible because every single one of you cares deeply and passionately about restoring the oyster. I don't need to talk to you about ecology. I'm not a scientist, but I am here to tell you as an expert on participation, my job is about participation and showing up. And every single one of you is doing that. And we can all give in our own unique way. I get to stand on the Senate floor and fight for your values. You get to fight every single day when it comes to participating in Marylanders Grow Oysters, when it comes to paddleboarding. I can't do what Chris did. That's incredible. But when it comes to donating your money to make sure that we are investing and we're putting our money behind the things that we care about, our values. I serve on a lot of Bay related issues, but my primary function in the Senate is to serve on the budget committee. And the budget is just a testament to our values. It's just a documentation on those values. And we need to show up with our money. And so I'm here to make a little pitch. I'm looking at Paul, because we can show up at the state level, we can pass policy, we can invest in hatcheries, we can invest in sanctuaries, but you are here today to be a citizen participant in that effort. And so I cannot thank you enough for putting your money where your mouth is, literally. I had an oyster shooter earlier today, so I hope you had vibed as well. But it's really about making sure that we live and breathe our values. And so just being here and participating and donating is incredibly important. So thank you so much for having me tonight. It's a privilege to represent you in the state Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, not only for your comments tonight, but for your leadership. All right, so now let's get to the meat of our program. I would like to ask Paul Shurik, who is the Director of Partnerships for the ORP, to give us an update of the Oyster Recovery Partnership's efforts, and then to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Whoa!
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. You know, about a year ago, we were here on this very deck and celebrating the Eastport Yacht Club's commitment. I knew that was going to be an issue. Thank you. Thank you. We were right here, and I think I was speaking right here on this deck about a year ago about the Eastport Yacht Club's commitment to oyster restoration, and it's phenomenal. I mean, you can't really do better than having partners like the Eastport Yacht Club, with the Severn River Association, with Senator Elfreth, who was sitting right there. And you know, just a brief word about the Severn River Association. Our friend and partner Bob Whitcomb shared with me today some news that the all right.
Fan club out there.
He's got a fan club, no doubt. Now, he shared with me the news that the oysters that have been planted and are living in the Severn River are really thriving. The oxygen levels are hitting new heights, and most importantly, the clarity of the water. He said it measured out at 1.4 meters of clarity. So that is. So,
And the Build a Reef.
that's right. Yeah, and you know, many of you are aware that the Severn River Association and the Oyster Recovery Partnership partnered two of the last 3 years to do our grassroots funded Build a Reef operation. So Bob, thank you very much. As I said, you can't do better than having partners like the EYC and Severn River. So we were here a year ago. I don't think anybody could have dreamed that we would be back here, you know, a year later today, kind of celebrating what I think can say is one of the more remarkable achievements in the history of the Chesapeake Bay. And you're going to hear from Chris in a minute about that. You know, Chris came to us a couple years with this idea of paddling the bay. It was a little nutty at the time. He said, "What you want to do? What?" But you know, as we got to know Chris, it became more serious. It obviously became more and more serious, and the task at hand was more and more laudable. And you know, before we knew it, we were standing in Havre de Grace, Maryland 3 weeks ago today, sort of watching Chris paddle off into a pretty stiff headwind. And before we knew it, you know, we were 9 days later in Cape Charles, Virginia, sort of congratulating him it really is for an amazing accomplishment. And, you know, before we knew it, we had more than 1,000 people who were signing up to donate money toward Chris's goal of 20 million oysters in the Chesapeake Bay. Before we knew it, we had partners signing on, local businesses signing on as sponsors, you know, Flying Dog Brewery, McCormick, All-Star Pain Management, Towboat US, who I hope no one is, or very few people are familiar with that. You know, the Maryland Department of Agriculture Seafood Marketing Agency coming on board as a sponsor, Clear Shark H2O as our educational sponsor, and started devoting our friend Bryan Gomes as Chris's wingman for 9 days. You know, every way you look at this journey, it was a success. You think about our paddlers' safety, it was a success. The complicated logistics were a success. The awareness of the Chesapeake Bay, the role oysters play, fundraising was a success. I'll get back to that in just a moment. Even the media, I'm going to point out my friend Ray Feldman, Annapolis's own Ray Feldman, who signed on as our Ray also has a fan club, who signed on as our pro bono media counsel, and Ray's done a phenomenal job. We are 2 million oysters short of Chris's goal of 20 million oysters to be planted in the Chesapeake Bay. I would ask and encourage everyone, take a minute, go online, you can text, it's all very, very easy to do these days to support this goal. We are almost at the goal of $200,000, which is just phenomenal. It's a pleasure for me, really, you know, to be brief and sit down, because you want to really hear from, you know, from the star of this show. You know, Chris is our kind of guy. He shows up with really big dreams, and then he's got the determination to see those dreams through. I hope you have had a chance to meet Chris and his wife Megan here this evening. If not, please try to take a minute. And I, like all of you, look forward to hearing Chris and kind of tell a little story about what happened 2 weeks ago. So Chris, thank you very much.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Hopkinson. I guess I'm now known as the. Thank you. I guess I'm now known as the Bay Paddler. So I appreciate you all hosting us tonight. So the paddle took 9 days. I've been celebrating for about 2 weeks, and I'm glad to be here celebrating with you all at the Eastport Yacht Club. So thank you very much for hosting me. So I'll give a little bit of background on kind of how we got to Havre de Grace. There was a documentary filmmaker following me, so we'll show a little bit of video of kind of pre-race or pre-paddle, and then I'll try to get some details or some of the fun stuff of the paddle itself, and there's a video of that too. I had a GoPro on me, so we capture a lot of good stuff. So to be honest, I think the first thing I want to say is that, like, I really felt honored to be out there. I was just so grateful to experience and see the Bay the way that I did in such a unique fashion. I mean, I don't know what Captain John Smith felt like, but it was amazing to see parts of the Bay that I'd never heard of. It was amazing to see it in the way that I did. And I have so much appreciation now, more so than I ever did before, for the Chesapeake Bay. I almost feel like we never have to leave Maryland to really enjoy nature and the environment and how beautiful the state of Maryland is. So for those of you who haven't sailed the Bay or boated the Bay, I would encourage you to do so. There's some amazing parts of the Bay, and it was just a real honor for me to be out there and see it all. So the way that we got to the Bay paddle, I just want to first say that I am no great paddler, right? Kevin's here from Capital Sup. Those guys are excellent paddlers. I'm a 46-year-old father of 3, husband. You know, anybody who's over the age of 40, you know that you can wake up in pain. Like you know, you can tear muscles sleeping. So that was my lifestyle. I had no ambitions to paddleboard the entire length of Chesapeake Bay. It was certainly not something that I was trying to check off, you know, any bucket list of mine. But I actually did a science project with my 12-year-old daughter, who was in 6th grade at the time. And we learned that a single oyster could filter 50 gallons of water per day. And as we've all read the news and heard the stories, I mean, we know the Bay is not doing as well as it should. And I think we have a responsibility to leave it better than how we found it. Yes. And it seemed to me that if the oyster population is down 99%, that there was, you know, an alignment of, well, I guess if we put more oysters in the Bay will be better. So my then 12-year-old daughter and I, we replicated the science project that we saw on the Oyster Recovery Partnership website, which was 2 20 gallons of Bay water in a fish tank, and we put oysters in those tank, and we literally watched those oysters clean the water in about 3 hours. So this tank that we had, we got the murkiest Magothy River water we could find, which is not hard. And we put a dozen oysters in from the Annapolis Seafood Market. You couldn't see the oysters in the tank. It was so dirty. And within 3 hours, you could see your hand clear across the other side. I wouldn't have drinking in the water, but it was amazing and really inspiring to see these little shells doing their work. So my inspiration was to put more oysters in the bay, and as I said before, to leave it as a better place. I thought paddling it was a crazy enough idea that people would pay attention and learn more about oysters, and then ultimately donate $200,000. So I hear now we're 20,000 short, which maybe means I have to paddle home. We'll figure that part out. But this was a 2.5-year project to go from this crazy idea to, landing in the Atlantic Ocean. I spent about a year, a little more than a year paddling, just to give you a sense of, when I say I'm no great paddler. I had never paddled more than 9 miles prior to training for this. I had paddled in the bay one time. I fell in 4 times during that. So I would have been the last person that anybody would have selected on any list to accomplish this, and yet here we are, right? So I have a lot of faith, and I think anything's possible. I was very set and determined on making this happen. I was more importantly set and determined on raising money and awareness for Oyster Recovery Partnership. So over a year ago, I started training for a race called Chattajack, which is a 31-mile paddleboard race in Chattanooga. And that's when I really got out on the bay and experienced the conditions were out there, and spent the last year and a half doing everything, the way I ate, the way I slept, my workouts, paddling, everything was dedicated to getting me in outside of a dad body. I guess maybe that was the ultimate goal. So I accomplished that. 3 things accomplished. We raised money, we paddled the bay, no more dad body. So why don't we show a little bit of kind of the training, just to give you a sense of what it was like and kind of my mindset. Again, there's a documentary filmmaker following me, so at some point before the end of the year, this will be a 30 or 40-minute clip, but we'll show you a little bit about what she captured during my training. No one that I know of has ever paddled the length of the Chesapeake Bay officially before. That distance is about 240 miles, and it will be about 9 days long. I have no idea if it's possible. People are like, wow, this guy's crazy. Why would anybody paddle the bay? All you hear about is the Bay Health Score, it's not doing great. Everybody wants to save the Bay, which is a great slogan, but it's really hard to put action to that, right? And so oysters are the action. Growing up here, I had no idea what an oyster did other than serve as, a good appetizer. I didn't know that they filtered 50 gallons of water a day. They create the reefs and all the environments where these crabs and fish and grasses can really grow. The population is down 99%. If everybody donated $10 and that put 1,000 oysters in the bay would be in great shape. And so the idea of paddling was really just, how can I draw attention to a story about oysters that people will pay attention to? It'll be something exciting and maybe painful. I think I already pulled something.
Told him he was crazy. I don't know what he's doing. And I was like, you know what? Let's do this. Woo!
A lot of folks have kind of jumped in and said, I want to help with a leg, or I want to do 30 miles.
There we go.
They said, wait a minute, are you going to be like Oyster Gump? It's going to be really hard. Like wind coming off the ocean, wind coming off the rivers.
Tankers coming through.
Yeah. Aircraft carriers.
What's this guy doing out here on a paddleboard? Like they do not stop. They're on a mission.
I was like that perfect combination. Someone who's not really a good paddler, doesn't really understand what it might take take to do this, and just sort of once the idea kind of hit me, I just didn't let it go. The bay definitely becomes a part of you, right? I guess it's hard to describe it. You feel like this connection to the ecosystem and the crabs and the herons and the eagles, and I've seen, you know, cow-nosed rays go underneath my board, and so you kind of all of a sudden feel like I'm the visitor here, right? Like I'm the guest. They can't protect themselves, and we're the ones doing all the damage. And so it really meant a lot to me to take on the responsibility of doing more so that my kids can enjoy paddleboarding or boating and fishing the way that generations before us have as well. Yeah. So just to give you an idea, well, first of all, the day that drone shot, the bay was never that calm ever again after that day. I knew that day I should just start heading south and be done with this thing. So that was a good kind of recap of some of my training, but I was basically training 6 days a week. So 4 days on the water, 2 days strength training. Starting in March, I trained with Capital Sup. I went out by myself. I live off the Magathie. I was paddling from the Magathie to the Severn, from the Magathie to the Patapsco, up in Havre de Grace. I really was on the bay 4 days a week. And I was in some pretty difficult conditions, some pretty heavy winds. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened in Havre de Grace on day one. So, I mean, I'd had headwinds before, I had tailwinds before, I'd had side winds before, I'd had warm temperatures, cold temperatures, and here we are in Havre de Grace, where I'd been up a few weeks earlier to paddle, and I was so thankful to start there because the water's really clear. There's less salinity, which makes you go a little bit faster. There's a little bit of a current coming off the Susquehanna, and so I just felt like that's going to be a really good day. My goal that day was to go 40 miles. We were supposed to start in Havre de Grace and end up at North Point State Park over here on the Western Shore, and I was very confident that that was going to be my best day. 40 miles, no problem, Havre de Grace, clear water, here we go, right? And 3 days before we started, I kind of became a de facto weatherman because I was looking at the weather so much and wind finder and everything else. And I started to look more at the weather, and here's these northeast winds and north winds and 15 plus knots. And I just thought, well, whatever. I mean, it's just some wind. And then as we got closer, it was like wind for Friday, wind for Saturday, wind like 5 straight days of 10 to 15 plus knot winds, all coming from the northeast, like unprecedented from what I can remember training, in that there'd be 5+ days of heavy winds, small craft advisory, and here I am going out on a 14-foot stand-up paddleboard. So we literally last minute shifted sides, decided to go on the eastern shore to get some protection from the wind, which was the best decision we could ever make, both from a condition standpoint, and it also turned the paddle from about 230 to about 203 miles. So I was extremely thankful in those last couple of days to not have to go 30 more miles. Havre de Grace, we started out of there. I felt really good coming out of Havre de Grace. Of course, I was wearing t-shirt and shorts, and no sunblock, of everything going on. You just don't remember all the little things. And we left Havre de Grace. The conditions got a little rough. Within a couple hours, Bryan Gomes, who was with me, his kayak started taking on water. He had to be pulled. We kept going. We get off of Aberdeen, which I had paddled before. And of course, on that day, at that time, they're practicing artillery rounds, which meant the patrol boats were about 500 yards off the shoreline, telling us we couldn't get anywhere near the shoreline. And the whole reason to get near the shoreline was to get out of the wind. So here we are kind of heading down, not quite the middle of the bay, but 1/3 of the way over, getting pounded. 3-foot waves, I probably fell in 15 times. Towboat US, who was amazing. I know everyone has had a towboat experience. They were incredible. They were with me, and I said, I got to get over. I can't take this anymore. And he said, I just radioed to the Eastern Shore. It's 4-foot swells over there. And I said, okay, let's just keep going down this side, and we'll figure it out. At one point, like if you've ever been in a canoe, this is what stand-up paddleboarding is like in heavy side winds. If you've ever been in a canoe where there's nobody up front and you're sitting in the back, the wind just takes you wherever it wants to take you. There's no steering. So I had to sit down, put my right leg in the water and paddle with my left to keep a straight line to not get blown across the bay. So eventually I said, I can't take this anymore. We got to get over to the eastern side. And I didn't want to do it too early because if I got over too early, I just get blown into the shoreline for the next 4 hours. So at about miles 16, 17, I made the decision to cross over. We started heading over. I got dunked a few more times. I got out. I was paddling again, and the support boats and towboat US just happened to be right there at that time. And Bryan Gomes was on the support boat, and he noticed me shaking uncontrollably, and he's like, "What day is it?" And I was like, "Today." And he's like, "We got to get you off the water." So I sat in a boat for 30 minutes to warm up, and not the way you want to start the bay paddle is by being pulled for hypothermia. Eventually got back in the water, made it to Rock Hall. It was about 33 miles. I think it took seven plus hours. Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually still in pain from that day one. I got done. I got home, an hour plus drive, and never during the training, never during the preparation, never during this crazy idea did I ever think this is going to be impossible. Even though everybody I talked to said this is crazy and it might be impossible. I literally got home and said to my wife, I think I'm in over my head. This might not be possible to do. And that was day one. And so I don't know, somehow I just figured I got to get to the next day. And keep in mind, I had IVs. So All-Star Wellness was coming over to give me IV therapy. I had a physical therapist doing dry needling. I had compression boots to get my legs back in shape. I was doing everything to get a 46-year-old dad bod ready to go the next day. I woke up and it just so happened the paddle never went as planned, except for the fact that we finished on the day that we said we'd finish. And we started on the day that we'd say we started. Everything outside of that was completely unplanned. And really happened in that moment. And on that second day, when I was super nervous about getting back on the water, literally afraid, legs shaking, Chris Norman from Capital Sup joined me, and a buddy of mine, Dr. Milford Marchant, joined. And they came in. And by the way, that Saturday, my wife and I had to drive over the Bay Bridge, and I can see the conditions. And I'm like, it looks like the Atlantic Ocean right now. I'm not sure this is going to be a whole lot of fun. And sure enough, it was, 3-foot swells, and we were supposed to have support boats, and one of them couldn't even make it out of the Magathie River. And that was on a 24-foot powerboat. So, at that point, we were on the eastern side. We were going to cut down Kent Narrows to try to stay away from the bay. But Chris and my buddy Milford came in with so much energy. It was like a couple leprechauns just showed up and were going to go paddling with me. And so that's the way kind of the paddle went. That day I was scared, and these guys came in just with all this energy and excitement. And the entire time it was just talking in my ear, we got this, we're going to do this. We got across the Chester. And it started at that point. I started to really appreciate the beauty of the bay. So we stopped at Elk Neck State Park. I'd never even heard of it. And, we basically washed up on their beach, and kind of, ate lunch. And at that point, I had a VHF radio on me, and I could hear Towboat US and the one support boat that came out chatting back and forth saying, what are these guys doing, eating crab cakes? Let's get this thing moving. So we got across the Chester. We got into Kent Narrows. A bunch of friends of ours were at Red Eyes Dock Bar. They were having a great time. We were paddling. We made it to Claiborne that day. And the entire time, every day on the paddle, it was such a tactical event. I never thought it would be so tactical. So every day I didn't really know where we'd end up. We had different destinations based on the distance and how we felt. And wherever we ended up had to put us in a good position for the win the following day. The conditions were so bad that we kind of had to figure out each day, we're starting here. In an ideal world, we'd get here, because the next day's conditions are going to be blowing from here, and we don't want to start into a headwind or a side wind. And that just became our daily routine. And on that day we got to Claiborne, I started to feel, it just became such a day-to-day struggle to some aspects at that point. I really just wanted to survive each and every day. And some days were amazing. One of my favorite days was, I think, day 3 or 4. They all kind of blend together. I know day 1 and day 9. Everything else is the other days. We came out of Taylor Island, and we rolled down to Crocheron, and this was day 4. I had texted Brian the night before, and again, we didn't know we were going. I'm like, tomorrow's going to be a marathon. We're going to do 26.2. And he said, I'm in for 12. And I said, no, we're going to do 26.2. And he said, okay, let's do it. So we leave Taylor Island. We just have boat support. And that was just, in terms of beauty of the bay, like we were in areas that no boat could get to. So I know some folks have probably sailed the bay and folks have boated the bay, but when you're in the middle of the bay, I think it's different. It's a different viewpoint from when you're hugging the shoreline. We were seeing 2 to 3 eagles a day, where it just became like another eagle, whatever, here they come again. We were hugging this shoreline, and it was super shallow, and it was so pristine and so untouched. We got down to, I think it was Tar Bay. We cut across Fishing Creek, and we got in the Honga River. And the Honga River is spectacular. And at that point, we're 4 days in. I don't even know how many miles, 70 plus miles in. And I texted my wife and I said, I'm having so much fun out here. And of course, 4 hours later, I was dying because, when you're paddling for 7 hours, you can only take the tide for so long before it switches. And on that day, around mile 20, it switched. So it's like the conveyor belt at the airport. You're walking on it, and all of a sudden you get off, and you're like, whoa, that's what it's like paddling against the current. So on that day, we made it to Crocheron, and again, like no plan in place. We ended up staying right there on the point at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation Karen Noonan Center. It was the only time where we actually stayed at the same place we got out of and would get back in the next day. And it was just like spectacular. I mean, the stars were everywhere, like a space rocket flew across the sky, like everything was kind of lining up. And I just was so thankful to experience it. We still had our moments from then on. We still, at that point, were 60 or 70 miles in, and we still had, maybe we were 80 miles in, who knows. We still had a long way to go. And I remember getting to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and the guy who was living there was like, you're not even halfway done. And I'm like, what kind of reading is that? We made it through Tangier. I'll tell you about one of my harder days. I'll tell you about the finish, and then we can kind of watch a little video on it. So that was Tuesday. Wednesday was through Tangier Sound, which was spectacular. Honestly, never felt, I can't tell you like how much the support from our community meant, because I would get hundreds of text messages and emails, and my wife would tell me about all the social media posts, and there's no way that I can ever experience, or I really wish everybody in their life could feel that kind of support. The support that I got every day was it was overwhelming for me. And I've kind of made it a mission now that I'm going to start texting my buddies and just say, you got this, randomly. And they're going to be like, I don't know, I just got a message from Chris. I'm about to brush my teeth. And he's like, you got this. But I could never have finished it. I told my wife multiple times, like, there's no way I'm letting anybody down here. We got to get through this. And so it felt like things were getting into a good routine. I could tell that I was getting physically tired because I was getting slower. And maybe I was slurring some speech, but I knew that at home, people were like, oh, he's only got 50 miles to go. And I'm thinking in my mind, like, I don't even know if I can go 15 more miles, right? I'm really in a lot of pain. And this Thursday, I'm 3 days out. The end felt in sight, but also really far away. We went out from Crisfield, and it was just a horrible day, like bad west winds, and we were getting into open water. And we were just getting pounded, like falling in a lot. And I fell in usually 8 to 10 times a day. So getting in and out of the water is exhausting. And on that day, we were going, normally we would be around 4 miles an hour, which would be a good pace. That day it was like under 2.5. And I just felt like I was getting punched in the face every time I hit a wave. And it was the only day where we did not make it to our goal destination, We got about 17 miles. It took 7.5 hours. It was 5 o'clock. We were 3 miles short, and we were sitting in the middle of the bay pretty much. And I just raised my hand to the support boat guys and said, I'm done. I can't take it anymore. And they pulled me off the water, and I could barely speak because I was so upset with myself. And we left, and I knew that day, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, Megan, but I want to get in the water at 7 a.m., and I don't want anyone to be around me. I don't want support boats, and I don't want kayaks, but I have 50 miles to go, and tomorrow has to be a big day or we're not going to finish this. And I literally got in the water by myself, and there's some video of it. If people watch the blog, it's the day where my wife's like, I'm not comfortable letting you go. And she's like, I love you. And I'm like waving my hand, like, stop talking. I just need silence. And I turned off my VHF radio, and I told Brian, like, I'll meet you in an hour or so. I'll be coming through this creek. Just catch on. And on that day, we cranked through 36 miles. It was like heads down, let's just go. And I did feel at a time, it was the best conditions we had in 8 days. It was perfect. I almost felt like God was like, you showed me you want to do this. So enjoy this day and get as far as you can. And I will never forget. So I had great boat support. They were all buddies of mine, which meant a lot to see familiar faces. And on that day, a 24-foot Scout, dual console boat came flying down from the Magathie with 4 of my buddies. And it's a long ride. They overnighted it. And at about noon, I could hear rap music coming from behind me, and I knew it was them. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And like that, the energy that those guys brought that day was so amazing. And I knew like a good day that day would be 25 miles because that would leave me 25 miles to do on the final day. Like a great day would be 30. If we did 30, that would be amazing because it would just make the last day easier. And at 25 miles, I kind of looked over to the support boat, and my wife's like, 10 miles to go, you can do it. And I'm like, that's 2.5 hours of standing and paddling. You people are crazy. But they said it in such a way like, of course you can do this. And I literally thought to myself, these guys want to see something. I'm going to show them something. So we got close to Cape Charles. I was in too shallow of an area. None of the boats could be around me. I had no idea where to go. Katie, the filmmaker, is apparently positioned somewhere, and everyone's like, you got to paddle to her because she says it looks amazing. And I'm like circling Cape Charles because I don't know where she is. I had to wait for the support boat to catch up, and they're like, she's over there. And I'm like, that's 2 more miles, man. I'm 34 in. Can we just call it a day? And they're like, no, you got to finish it. So that was our 36 miler. It was an amazing end, and then literally the next day was our 14-mile finish to the end. And I just tried to enjoy the last day as much as I could. I was at that point literally like my knees were shot. They would swell up, and I could feel them around mile 12. I saw the Oyster Recovery folks. We were at an overlook. And I've been asked this a few times, but everyone's like, oh, did you see anything cool? Any sharks, anything? I'm like, just a bunch of eagles, whatever. And sure enough, we're like 2 miles from the finish, and these dolphins breach. We hadn't seen any dolphins at all the entire time. They breach out, go under my board, and breach out on the other side. And they caught it all on film, and Katie, the filmmaker's like, this just became a dolphin documentary. It's no longer about the bay paddle. You're just going to be in it because the dolphins were there. And so, of course, we're just about to finish. We get close to the Atlantic, and here come the waves and the winds. And I had not fallen in the entire day, which I was so proud of. And we get literally like the last 500 yards, I probably fell in 7 times. And I could hear boat support like, this is a few more feet. Just get back up. You can't finish sitting down. And I don't know if you see the end. It's me standing and literally just kind of collapsing back into the Atlantic. And to be honest, like I had almost no emotion finishing. It was relief, but it wasn't like I was excited. I think part of it is like, to me, the job isn't done, right? We want to save the bay. We want to put more oysters in the bay. Paddling the bay for me was just a start. So I'm glad it's there and it's done, but we're going to do a lot more with the bay paddle. I am only just beginning. I sort of feel like a mermaid out of water. Like I'm looking at the water right now and I'm like, should I be paddling right now? I don't know. So I can't wait to do more with the bay paddle. I can't wait for the documentary to come out. I'm going to try to make the paddle an annual race, not the whole bay, but maybe one of the days and that will also be to benefit Oyster Recovery Partnership. So I'll take some questions at the end if we have time, but why don't we watch kind of a little bit of the clips that Katie caught of me out on the water and Brian, and this is all GoPro stuff for the most part.
Temperature when you're soaking wet and paddling. I learned my lesson on that one real quick.
My goal is to fall in less every day. We stay to the right the whole way.
We're gonna stay on the top shore and then cut?
Yeah, because if we hug Oxford, we're going in the wrong direction.
You're willing to take questions,
Yes.
and I know you all have questions. I have questions. I just had to stop for 1 second to say I am so inspired. I hope you all are as well. And for him to share, for you, Chris, to share your story. You are now part of our 40th year. So
Oh, thank you.
have
Thank
that.
you very much.
But I also want to make sure that you all know baypaddle.org. He is so close. His goal was $200,000 to put 20 million oysters. And we are 2 million oysters away from that goal. So if you want to be part of this journey and this story, baypaddle.org. So I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to do the commercial.
Thank you.
But let's take some questions.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys want to do questions. Oh, my wife has a question?
Can we go home now?
Yeah. I'll cut the grass tomorrow. Is that?
So I'd like to know, it seems like it's kind of a blur right now. But looking back on it, was there a particular moment that you're going to hold in your heart as your moment of your memory of this?
Yeah, so what was my favorite moment or memory? So the run from Taylor Island down the Honga was my favorite moment. So the first 12 miles that day, that was one of those moments where I'm like, this place is, our bay is spectacular. And I was incredibly grateful in that moment to experience it the way that we were, which was in very shallow water, going through Fishing Creek, which is essentially narrows into the Honga. We pulled up to an abandoned house and an abandoned dock. The towboat guy was like, I can't get through here. I'll see you guys on the other side. And sure enough, he came through. And we actually ate lunch there. And I was just staring straight down the Honga like, this is amazing. And the Honga is really untouched bay. So that was one of my favorite parts, and I'll definitely get back there. Yeah.
I know you've talked about the weather and the wind and the waves and all that, but what is there one thing that you would say surprised you the most? Like, what is the one thing that surprised you the most that you didn't count on or didn't figure on day one, and then by day 9, you knew about it? But was there one thing that surprised you the most about the journey?
I didn't expect there to be heavy wind for 8 days. So having to navigate the wind probably surprised me the most. Like, it was so heavy, 10 plus knots. And even if it's a downwind or a north wind behind me on a 14-foot board, normally the waves are maybe 4 feet apart. So it's not like you're surfing. If anybody saw the clip of me falling in, that was a downwinder with just heavy chop. And the wind was the biggest thing that surprised me, just because it was so frequent and so steady for so long. Like I look out here today, I'm like, why not today? But it was never like this, which makes the bay, and it makes paddling or kayaking the bay the challenge that it is. Yep.
What did you eat?
What did I eat? I ate a lot, but not enough. So I was burning 3,500 calories a day most days. I think it was 27,000 calories over the 9 days, maybe a little bit more. I had basically the same thing every single day. So I'd eat eggs, avocados, pancakes every morning. I had, as my wife has said, like there was a whole suitcase full of my supplements. I usually I called them Ironman sandwiches because I made them when I was doing an Ironman, but it was sun butter, banana, honey, cinnamon sandwiches. I'd have 4 of those a day on the board. I'd have 4 protein bars. I had a Camelback packed with my stuff. And part of the reason for boat support was I'd swap out nutrition midway. So I'd go through my first half days, 2 sandwiches, 2 bars, probably 90 ounces of fluids, throw that onto the boat, pick up the new stuff, whole same thing, 2 sandwiches, 2 protein bars, 90 ounces of fluids, a lot of aminos, a lot of electrolytes. In terms of nutrition, I was really dialed in. I felt great. Usually at night, I had my wife made pasta for like a week, and I ate that every night. It was actually really hard to eat. It's hard to explain, but like you're almost too tired to eat. And especially right afterwards, you just don't have the appetite. So I was just trying to eat whenever I could, but it was never enough. Yes, sir.
So I've got a question just from a mental standpoint
Yeah.
and a physical standpoint.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about your success, but what was the most difficult hurdle to get over through the entire thing through the entire day?
Physically or mentally or both?
Both.
Okay, so
Because I find them both very important.
Yeah.
For a challenge.
So I think maybe, yep. So the question was, what was the biggest physical challenge and what was the biggest mental challenge? So physically, my legs, I don't know, maybe people think paddling, it's all arms and backs, but it was all legs. I mean, if you just stand in one place for 7 hours, your legs are going to get sore. Balancing and you're doing these mini squats, my legs were really tired, really sore. Usually by the end of each day, like you couldn't see my knees or ankles because they were just swollen, which it's hard to believe, but like I'm almost thankful for it being a leg problem, because if it had been an arm problem and I couldn't paddle, that would have been a lot worse than just being like, just don't move too much. So the legs were the biggest thing, which is why I got dry needling actually. Mentally, it was getting through. The first day was such a mental beating. I've done 2 Ironmans. They were 12 plus hours, and never had been through anything like I experienced the first day, which was a 7.5-hour paddle, where I was just so physically and mentally beaten by the bay. It was like I started in Havre de Grace and just got thrown down into Cross and ended up in Rock Hall. That day was like a mental challenge. But I think like I don't have any God-given gifts, but I do have a gift, I think, of being able to go nowhere in my head. So a lot of people ask me all the time, like, what do you think about when you're paddling for 7 hours? And I can literally think about nothing for 7 hours. I'm like a Seinfeld episode about nothing. So I can sit there for 7 hours and think about nothing and be fine. And so maybe that's like my gift, is to just go blank, which my wife lives with me. She sees it even when I'm at home and not paddling. So I think hopefully that answers your question. Yep. Cool. Well, I'll be around. If anybody else has any questions, please come see me. Thank you all so much for your support. Thanks for allowing me to come out tonight. Thank you.
I'm Virginia Tippy, and I'm the co-chair of the EYC Environmental Committee, and all I want to say is thank you, Chris Hopkinson. Let's give him a great hand. Woo! And I know Chris is going to be hanging around here on the upper deck for a little while, and we got some posters that he can sign, as well as, of course, our whole Bryan Gomes, who is the kayaker. And so we have the cast of characters that were involved in this great epic journey. Congratulations, Chris Hopkinson. Congratulations to the ORP, Oyster Recovery Partnership.